Excellent. Thank you. So I'll just welcome everybody again. I know we've got some folks who just joined us. Um, thank you so much for attending this last session of the day. We're going to give some brief introductions. So who we are. Kumi, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name is Ikumi Krokl. I'm the Instruction and Engagement Librarian at UCLA's William Andrews Clark Memorial Library. And I'm with Notes from the Field. Since it's my third year with a team, that means I cycle to lead editor at this point.
Hey everyone, I am Melissa Chim. I am the Scholarly Communications Librarian at Excelsior University, and I am in my first year as being the Associate Editor with the Case Study series.
And I'm Rachel Duke. So I'm the Research and Engagement Program Director for Special Collections and Archives at Florida State University. And I happen to be in a kind of funky position of serving on both boards. And so I can kind of speak to the differences between both. And that kind of led to the idea for this session. Um, yeah. So the session goal is by the end of this conversation, we're hoping you'll have a clearer sense of which venue might fit your work and also kind of what the submission process looks like for each venue. So just a quick poll. I'd love it if you drop your answers in the chat. So first of all, have you published before? And then second, maybe if you haven't, have you had an idea, but you just didn't know where to put it? Can we hear from you about your publication history and maybe like, do you have aspirations to publish and you aren't really sure where it should go? Not published yet, but hoping to be soon. That's great. So I don't know if we're going to get a lot of involvement. It is the end of the day. Yes, a while back, and yes, looking to publish more. That's awesome. Always ideas, but haven't done much with them. I think that happens to me quite a bit. Dee Dee, we're going to talk about Notes from the Field, which might be a great venue if you're not wanting to write in sort of academic ease. Yes, only once. Yes, but unsure of how to plan and scope an article. Awesome. So keep popping your answers in the chat. I really appreciate hearing from you all. So our goal today is to help you kind of figure out where to go with the ideas that you have. I know we all have ideas. We're teaching regularly and we come across kind of inspiration that we want to share with the community. So when you have those ideas, we'd like you to know of at least two venues that you can publish.
So, why publish about teaching? Teaching insights are scholarly contributions that allow us to share practical strategies and innovations. The publishing allows us to share practical strategies and innovations, reflect on our own practice, build a collective body of knowledge around teaching with primary sources, and support professional growth and promotion goals.
So there's two publications kind of in the TPS community publishing ecosystem, and those are Notes from the Fields and Teaching with Primary Sources case studies. Both are valuable venues, but they serve different purposes and audiences. And the key question is often not, is my idea good enough, but which venue is the best fit?
So, starting with Notes from the Field, what is it? It's a publication of the TPS Collective that features peer-reviewed blog posts focused on teaching and working with primary sources. It highlights practical lessons from the front lines of teaching with primary sources. And it was created to foster conversation and knowledge sharing across the broad TPS community, which includes librarians, archivists, museum professionals, educators, and various practitioners working in a variety of contexts.
So the typical characteristics you might see in a Notes from the Field publication is that they're, first of all, published as peer-reviewed blog posts rather than traditional articles. They're generally a little shorter than case studies, so they're 1,000 to 1,200 words, and they're highly accessible. They're grounded in day-to-day practice, and they frequently connect to themes emerging from TPS Fest sessions like this one and TPS listserv discussions. They also encourage authors to share not only successes, but also uncertainty, adaptation, and lessons learned. And I'm going to show an example later on, and you'll see that it's very frequently they're in the first person. They're very conversational. So there are two separate series within Notes from the Field. One is Reflective Practice and the other is Practical How-To. The Reflective Practice series provides a space for thinking about our teaching in a broader context. Articles may relate to successes and failures in the classroom or any other aspect of teaching with primary sources and how it relates to the cultural heritage fields at large. So we frequently get pieces that ask questions like, what did this experience teach me? How has my thinking changed? What tensions or challenges emerged as the result of a teaching decision? What questions am I still wrestling with? And the kinds of articles you'll see are articles about teaching with emerging technologies. We just recently published on AI in the special collections classroom, navigating difficult conversations, revising instructional approaches, or like unexpected outcomes that you've experienced from classroom experiences. So the other series is Practical How-To. And this is from the website. The Practical How-To series offers advice and instructions that are directly applicable to any classroom environment. From document camera usage to communication strategies, learn more about how your colleagues approach their work in the classroom. So in this case, you'll get pieces that ask questions like, how did I do this? Or what steps might someone else take? What materials, workflows, or structures supported the success of this session? And then it might be, these pieces might be things like designing an assignment, like how an assignment was designed, teaching with unfamiliar formats, running workshops, or building instructional activities.
So, what are editors looking for at Notes from the Field? They're looking for relevance to teaching and working with primary sources, practical value for colleagues, a clear takeaway or insight. The article should show strength, strong reflection and authentic voice. And we look for writing that's accessible to practitioners across contexts. And finally, we want contributions that help advance ongoing community conversations. So for the submission and review process, calls are usually issued seasonally, usually 3 times a year, and they're often centered on themes drawn from the TPS community interests and current conversations. Submissions then undergo a peer review process despite the blog format. Posts are published on a rolling basis, and authors work collaboratively with editors to strengthen their process. And finally, the publication is published under a Creative Commons license.
So now we can move on to teaching with primary sources case study series. And so what is that? It's an open access peer reviewed publication series sponsored by the Society of American Archivists. It's designed to illustrate how teaching with primary sources unfolds in specific contexts and to build a shared body of evidence around primary source pedagogy. It's also designed to illustrate the application of the guidelines for primary source literacy. It features contributions from a range of institutional settings, disciplines, audiences, and instructional formats.
So a typical case study is going to focus on a clearly defined instructional intervention, assignment, class session, program, or collaboration. It might provide sufficient context for readers to understand the setting and constraints. It should explicitly identify learning goals and instructional design decisions. It should include discussion of outcomes, assessment, or thoughtful consideration of how learning was observed. It should reflect honestly on both successes and challenges and offer enough detail that readers could adapt the approach to their own environments. So, common questions that are addressed in case studies are, which primary source literacy guidelines informed the work? What problem or instructional need prompted this approach? What did the teaching intervention look like? How did the students respond? How do we know what students learned? What would we change if we did this again? And what aspects of this work might transfer to other contexts?
And here's what the editors are looking for. The suggested length for articles is usually around 2,000 to 3,000 words. We're looking for a clear articulation of instructional goals, meaningful engagement with the guidelines for primary source literacy, rich contextual detail, reflection that extends beyond mere description, evidence of assessment or a thoughtful discussion of assessment strategies, and practical transferability for readers. So next, here's a bit about the submission and review process. So submissions are accepted on a rolling basis. We do have a submission form that's required. We do single blind peer review by 3 volunteer reviewers using a rubric. Editorial feedback is intended to strengthen the manuscript. Accepted pieces are copy edited and published through SAA, and like Notes on the Field is published under a Creative Commons license. So now that we kind of introduced both of them, here is basically like a side-by-side comparison of the two. You could see how sometimes they're similar, sometimes they're different. Like Notes from the Field's tone is a little bit more conversational, whereas the case study series is a little bit more formal. So if you were looking more for an academic publication, the case studies is a good way to go. But with Notes from the Field, if you wanted something a little bit more informal, that's a good venue too. One thing I would like to highlight is the central question of each, because I think these really show like the heart of each publication. So from Notes on the Field, it's really asking what is a teaching insight, question, challenge, or innovation that this community would benefit from hearing about. And then for the case study series, it's a little bit different. It's what instructional approach have you documented in enough detail that others could understand, adapt, and potentially replicate. And so I would like everyone to kind of think about now, as you're thinking about where you would like to publish and what you would like to publish, where do you think your current idea fits?
All right. So as you go about planning submission, we do have both publications have very clear guidelines available for you. And I just wanted to highlight sort of where they're located. So first of all, with Teaching with Primary Sources case studies, there's this wonderful How to Submit a Teaching with Primary Sources case study, which is a useful link. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and pop it into the chat here. That is the submission. It also includes the submission form. There is a form that breaks down exactly the structure of a case study. And so it's very clear about sort of everything that needs to be included in a case study publication. And we also have Notes from the Field has these author guidelines that are helpful. It breaks down everything, length, tone, style, everything that you need to know about submission. And you'll see that photographs and graphics are really kind of important. We do like pieces that have photos included. And so it gives you guidelines about how to both submit, but also how you can include images with that submission. Um, so after you submit a Teaching with Primary Sources case study, we receive it, and we do send along the case study to reviewers. So we have a bank of reviewers. If we, in both cases, in case studies and Notes from the Field, we collect names and email addresses of folks that want to be considered as a potential peer reviewer. And we can add you to that list if that's something that you're interested in. Please get in touch with us. There will be emails at the end of the presentation. With revision for case studies, it does go kind of back and forth. And final copy editing in the case of the case studies is done by SAA publications. So we're not kind of the final stop. It stops with SAA publications. And the timelines can really vary depending on reviewer response time. Like right now we're in summer. We're having some trouble getting a hold of reviewers sometimes. I think people are on vacation, and so it can take a couple of months. But it can really vary according to the time of the year and just sort of, how the process goes, whether there's a lot of back and forth and revision necessary or not. For Notes from the Field, it's very similar, but instead of 3 reviewers, 2 reviewers are going to look at the piece. Ikumi, there's a little back and forth, right? But we're not,
Yeah, there is
yeah.
some, but usually not a final kind of copy editing feedback. Usually, I mean, obviously, there can always be exceptions if we need some final comments or final revisions, but it's not usually like this whole back and forth process. It's, we usually give you some revisions, some thoughts, suggestions, and then, then the person takes in what they think is appropriate. And then we usually publish it unless there's something else that we need to we feel like needs more conversation.
And there's like a slightly shorter timeline for notes from the field. I think some of that is because it doesn't have to go through the SAA kind of publication process. So those are kind of how the timelines are different. Common misconceptions. So to be clear, you don't have to have all of the answers. One of the things we want to encourage you to do, someone said earlier that you have ideas, but you aren't sure how to outline it. Get in touch with either board. We're happy to talk to you about your ideas and help you plan for submitting something. You don't have to have the submission completed and in its final stages in order to submit. You can send an idea and have a conversation with us about it before submitting the piece. Your idea should contribute something new, but it does not have to be revolutionary. It can be, I observed this in some cases, and I'd like to report on it. It really, we just want it to be something that the community can benefit from. So think through it like that. And then the last note is that editors really want you to succeed. And so if you get nothing else from this presentation, I'd like you to know that we're human beings and we're pretty nice. We like to communicate with submitters and go back and forth about their pieces and really help them out. So we're here to help, basically. So now I just wanted to show some examples. I think that you're able to see my screen now. Can you see the piece that I'm holding, I have up? So this is a recent submission for the case studies on teaching with primary sources. I wanted to show you recent submissions for each so that you can see sort of the difference. So this was by Hannah King and Brian Hurley. It's archives and campus dialogue using archival sources to engage undergraduates in contemporary campus debates. So what you'll see is that there's a really kind of well-defined structure for a case study submission. So we have first, they identify which learning objectives from the primary source guidelines, primary source literacy guidelines they used in or are referring to in this piece. They give the case study location, there's a publication date, but then you have to give your introduction and institutional context. You're contextualizing the work that you did. There is a narrative that you provide about the work. There's a section on results. So there is a lot of emphasis on assessment and, kind of feedback on the work. And then there's a section on lessons learned. So that's the structure of a case study. And you can also see the length. It's about 5 pages here. For notes from the field, it's a lot more like a blog post, as we've mentioned. So this is a recent one in the Practical How-To series by Maya Clark. And it's the purpose of the presses, teaching the fine press movement with a tactile timeline of primary sources. And it's really emphasizing that you can putting books, kind of fine art books, along a continuum to show the relationship between them. And this is beautifully illustrated in the images that were included with the piece. So you can see this is a lot less structured. You'll see here, physically, these are materials I most frequently warn students. So there's first person speech and a lot of reflection in this piece about, this is what was successful, this wasn't, etc. So that's what a notes from the field piece tends to look like.
Okay.
So we're